What is up, everybody? Welcome into episode 17 of Chris and Company. I am Chris Castellani. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We have a very, I'm going to say a unique interview, a thoughtful interview with comedian Josh Potter. When I say friend of the program, sometimes I mean that ironically. I bring this up in the interview. In actual friend of the program, like somebody I have met in person and have hung out with at least once. He's always been very supportive of my stuff. Huge sports fan. I'm really proud of this interview. And I think, as I've said in the past, I want to mix things up with the guests that we have on. Believe it or not, this may be a shocker to people out there. There are things in the world that I am interested in beyond just baseball and other sports, and one of them is comedy. And I'm interested to it was very fun to pick his brain talking about coming up as a guy in radio and honing his craft in comedy. So really interesting, and of course we do talk a fair amount of sports. So if you come here for the sports talk, don't worry, you get plenty of it. But before we get to the interview, I want to let you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. I saw the analytics. Thank you very much to my YouTube feed. 60% of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed to this channel. It might be more than that, but I'm pretty sure it's 60. So let's change that. If you want more Chris and Company, if you like Chris and Company, subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell notification. That'll let you know that every time I upload an episode of Chris and Company or any video, it's notified directly to your phone. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify. All the good stuff. Leave reviews. Hey, there's a little thumbs up there. Hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, sometimes that happens. I have no idea why that happens. I think government's probably trying to hack my computer. I finally knew too much. Anyway, all right, whatever. I will be back to wrap this thing up, but let's waste no more time and jump into our interview with Josh Potter. Chris and Company rolls on, episode 17. We are joined today by one of the few people that I've interviewed so far, outside of members of my previous employer, who I've actually met in real life. And waving at Tarek Skubal in the dugout does not, or when he's warming up, doesn't count. I've actually met you. We hung out in Chicago in 2022 that summer. Josh Potter, the host of the Josh Potter Show. You probably know him from the Josh Potter Show, formerly of the Your Mom's House podcast as well, where he was on with Tom and Christina P. Josh, what's going on, man?
What's up, dude? Yeah, I can't believe it's been 2022 already, since I seen you last. It seems like just like last summer or whatever.
Yeah, I know, man. What do you have any idea when you're going to be performing in Michigan?
I don't have any Michigan dates as of yet, but I think I'm getting a Detroit one for this year at some point. I should be, so I'll let you know for sure. I'm going back to Chicago May 15th through 17th. I know that, but okay. Yeah, I don't have a Detroit as of yet, but I know I'm working on it for sure because I've been talking about it. So we'll see.
For sure, yeah. And in the description for this video as well, I'll make sure to link to your website where people can get a list of all tour dates and everything, as well as everything that you're doing. But I like to kind of go back into the past when I start these interviews. I always use the term deep dive, and I've never started an interview like this, but I'm going as far back as I could possibly go with you, and that is birth, because you have a pretty fascinating birth story that I've heard you tell on podcasts before. If you could just kind of talk about that a little bit, the origin story of Josh Potter, because it's pretty remarkable stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was born very early. I was born 4 months early, and it was from what I don't remember any of it, thankfully.
Right.
Although I've heard from professionals that there's probably still some trauma attached to that. But I have no recollection of it. For my mother, it was probably a very trying time, I was born super early, super small, like underweight, obviously. And and it's in the 80s. So they didn't know, am I going to live? Am I going to die or whatever? And I had to stay in an incubator for quite a long time. And, that leads to isolation and, I guess being away from your, people touching you as a bad thing. I guess that's how like the Unabomber went crazy. So there's like, parallels there. No, but yeah, it was. I thankfully don't remember any of that, and it didn't really cause me any sort of immediate like, shitty results other than I guess my eyes are a factor of that. And I always thought it was because like the eyes are the last thing on a baby to like form. But turns out I found out it's more so because like the oxygen in the incubator is like they pump that in and that can fuck up your eyes when they're just like brand new or whatever. So, I've heard a couple theories on it. So there's that like lingering factor, I guess you could say, based off of it. But other than that, it wasn't terror. It wasn't like something that I like have nightmares about or whatever. But
Right. Yeah, it was a little bit too early for thoughts to be formed. I feel like,
yeah, or
at that
memories
point,
or whatever.
at that point in your life. But yeah, no, I was doing going down the rabbit hole this week, and I found you telling that story. I thought it was pretty interesting. But we talked when we hung out in Chicago a little bit about your background, how you got started, and I know you got started in radio. And were you when you started? Were you doing talk shows or were you on music shows that featured like speaking beds in between songs?
It was a little bit of both. Like I worked for a rock station, and on the rock station we had a local morning show that was basically like, I mean, it started in 1994 when all those shows started in 1994, like Opie and Anthony, Don and Mike, all these other sort of like dude talk shows or whatever you want to call it.
Morning
Like I guess they were like, yeah, they were like shock jockey shows. Some of them were in the afternoon at the time, even. But it was kind of like I forget what they branded it as in radio. It was like hot talk or whatever the hell, And they were typically on rock stations, and a lot of the shows locally, you'd work on one of these and they would play music. Our show didn't play music. It was 4 hours of talk. And then I also did shifts like on the weekends, and eventually I became the night DJ, and also was on the morning show, but doing, spinning records or whatever. So I did both.
Was that rock station, was that 103.3 The Edge?
It sure was. Yeah, I worked there for like 17 years of my life, and I
Wow,
worked.
really? Was it that long?
Yeah, and I worked like in between. There was like a stint for about 2 years, or not 2 years. It was about like a year and some change, where I worked at a sports station in Cleveland, 92.3 The Fan, and I did like I worked on the morning show there too.
Did you grow up in Buffalo? Were you born in Buffalo?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Buffalo.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. And I know you brought him up earlier, and I think we might have even talked about it the last time we talked in Chicago. But did you grow up as an Opie and Anthony fan?
I grew up as just like a radio fan. I was obsessed with like Stern, even like I discovered Stern through like watching E Network, and then in our market we had the show I worked on, Shred and Reagan, and there was another station in town that was like a Jack FM, but before it was Jack FM, it was that whole like failed experiment that was like Free FM, and it had just all shock jock shows like throughout the day. So it'd be like Stern in the morning, and then like this JV and Elvis show, or Don and Mike was in the middays, and then eventually like Opie and Anthony were in the afternoons. And then when Opie and Anthony got fired, Don and Mike went to the afternoons on that station, and then it was like Ron and Fez at nighttime. So I was obsessed, even though I didn't work on that station, and it was nothing local about it. It was just all piping in, syndicated shows. I was obsessed with like listening to the format. I mean, I was just like, I just wanted to be on that so bad. And I even listened to, when I was growing up, I really listened hard to the show that I ended up working on. I was like, I want to work. I really didn't have any sort of grasp at like what a job was in that business. Like I said to myself, I want to be one of the guys on that show. And then I did it before I graduated high school. So it was like, I was like, wow, I achieved the only goal I've ever set out to achieve. I didn't really know where to like go from there. It was like, all right, I'm 16 and I am one of the guys on that show now, and I make $22,000 a year. What do I do now? Like I had no desires beyond that. So it got kind of weird there for a couple of years.
I've heard Rogan talk about this in the past, and I agree with him. Do you think that kind of age of the shock jock show was kind of like like the inception of the podcast to a certain extent, where it was very, having listened to Stern or Opie and Anthony or any one of the Front Fest, it was very free flowing. You had your own characters that you brought onto the scene, and there wasn't necessarily any specific topics, but it was more so about the personalities on the show. Do you feel like that kind of paved the way for kind of like what you're doing now with Josh Potter Show?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it paved the way to what I'm doing now. There's like elements of what I do now that I like brought in from radio. Like I just do kind of like a news spaghetti and stuff like that. But I'm kind of a solo act, whereas like a lot of those morning shows and what I miss about them, and there are podcasts that exist like this, but there are podcasts that are kind of like morning zoo shows. I mean, like Your Mom's House, Legion of Skanks. It's like it is like the primary hosts, but there's like an ensemble to it. You have your reoccurring characters, things like that. And if there was no, I was thinking about this the other day because OJ died. And if OJ didn't kill those two people, we wouldn't have Opie and Anthony. We wouldn't have any of the comedians we have. If you think about it, I mean, Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown died so that we could have a plethora of comedians that we maybe wouldn't know about in the same context that I mean, Opie and Anthony spawned Jim Norton, Bill Burr, Nick DiPaolo, Artie Lang, not Artie Lang, he was on Stern, but like all those dudes, Colin Quinn, Louis C.K., all these guys were starting to sell tickets back in the day based off of, doing clubs that I do now, based off of doing Opie and Anthony. And, now it's like when you go on the podcast, it's the same kind of thing. You plug them. And in fact, they have even greater reach because they reach outside of the United States. And they also reach nooks and crannies of the United States, maybe like Opie and Anthony wouldn't have reached because you're not living in a major market. I don't know if they were syndicated in like Nebraska or some shit like that. But,
yeah, I think they were for a time, and then I think it got cut off because I remember Opie was really upset about that at one point. I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean they were syndicated quite a bit, but it was mostly like major markets, and I'm not sure exactly like how many like nooks and crannies of the country it might have reached, until it was on the internet or whatever. But yeah, I mean podcasting now it's like there's also many podcasts that are like NPR or whatever. You listen to like an interview format or like sports talk. It's actually kind of crazy because like in radio, sports talk is still pretty king. Like that's probably the top radio format at this moment, and it kind of hasn't really like obviously there are very popular sports podcasts, but you would think that there would just be more, based off of. But I think people just like turning it on and hearing their guys or whatever to a degree. And plus, sports is very like it's keeping legacy media alive in a lot of ways, like television rights deals and radio broadcasts and everything. I mean,
yeah. I also think sports is one of the few topics left where keeping it local actually works. Like I think from a lot of other places, like it helps. And I used to go off about that all the time, where it's like these local stations would brag about, they don't know about Winchester, and it's like, well, in general, a lot of people kind of just might not care that as much about Winchester. But like if you're a Cleveland sports fan, you're going to tune into the Cleveland radio station. If you're a sports station, same in Detroit, same in New York or Chicago or any other major market. So for you, did the stand-up start pre-radio or post-radio career?
No, I mean, I started radio when I was 16, and I had no, I wanted to be just like one of the guys who wrote bits and like was funny on the radio. Mm-hmm. I thought that was like my future. I thought I was gonna just like, it was like my dream to be like the third guy on a show. You know what I mean? And eventually I did that to a degree, and I was doing it, and I was like, okay, what next? And then through doing radio, you meet stand-up comics of all different ilks, and there was obviously local guys that we would have in once in a while, and I became friends with. And Matt Bergman, who I do my Patreon with right now, like we just do almost like a Tuesdays with Stories type of podcast where we're just kind of catching up for the week or whatever. But we do a lot of inside baseball comedy talk on there, but he was the one who was like, we would have him in and he goes, have you ever thought about, I remember we were just driving in a car. I think we went to like a Silver Sun Pickups concert, and he asked me, he goes, you ever thought about doing stand up? And I was like, I've thought about it, and I just don't know like how to go about it. And he goes, well, you go to open mics and you just, you do them. And I still didn't even really grasp what he was telling me. And so I was like, yeah, I'd be down to try it. And so he told me where an open mic was. I went and I did it, and it was like awful. And I didn't know up from down or left from right. I was like, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I thought like, all right, I did the open mic. And then he put me on a show that was like a crazy show. There was like 200 tickets sold. I mean, it was like my first instance in front of a crowd like that. And I went up and everyone was doing good. I went up kind of like toward the beginning. He gave me like a 5 minute guess that he knew I was like brand new, but it was kind of like a throw me into the sea sort of situation, you know? And I went up and I fucking ate it, dude. I was like, it was so bad. Like, I still have, like, I can, if I put my brain back into that, that was like the worst feeling I've ever had on stage in my entire life. And it took me a year. Like, I got off and I puked in the alley and I like,
Oh,
it took me like a year before I even tried it again after that. But he was the one who like kind of helped me get started. Cause then after that, I realized like, oh, I have to do this like, something clicked a couple of months later where it's like, you know, I was like, oh, I have to go, like, I have to really, like, do this, like, every day if I can, you know,
yeah. It did.
to get good at it.
I think what a lot of people like don't understand sometimes about stand up is it's kind of similar to being a hitter in baseball, where like you're from a math standpoint, your percentage is probably going to be relatively low, but if you're hitting 300, you're doing a good job. Like even the best comedians, you are made to fail. That's how you know when your material is working to a certain extent.
To a
Am I,
degree,
yeah,
it's more, I would say more like, going to the gym, I guess, or like weightlifting or something. Like, because eventually the percentages get higher the more you work at it and the better that you get. That's the goal, is to kind of minimize those bombs. I mean, but the thing about it is you have to be comfortable with it, because if you're doing new stuff, there's no telling, you know, you might not have it figured out of the gate. You know, that's natural. You have to do it to figure it out. So in those instances, yes, like, I mean, I had a set at the Comedy Store the other night that just like was jarringly bad. I was like, I haven't had a bomb like that in a minute. Like, it's been years maybe. And I was like, woof, that was tough. Like one where it like stuck with me for a little while, you know what I'm saying? Like a couple days. But yeah, I mean, it's more like trying to get your you know, do the reps and everything like that, so that you can just kind of walk into a situation and be able to handle it and raise those percentages up a little bit.
has it become easier or harder for you to bomb with the more famous you've gotten?
Harder, I mean, because then people,
More
I
pressure.
mean, and at the Comedy Store it's a little different. Like, I've never really bombed when I've headlined, thankfully. I mean, people are
Yeah.
coming to see you, but it also kind of is a mind fuck for me, because I'm so used to, well, like, I was so used to like opening shows for people where the people don't know who the hell I am, and you have to kind of go in there and like win them over. In this case, it almost started getting like not too easy, but it was just like people were coming to see me, so they were sort of giving me the benefit of the doubt, and I felt like it made some things softer. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
wasn't, and it just kind of like changed my gauge of like where I'm at with like jokes and stuff like that. So it kind of was a mind fuck for a second. And thank God I just recently got passed at the Comedy Store as a paid regular. So now it's like I can go in there and like the people that are coming there might be coming to see like Eliza Schlesinger or Bobby Lee or something. You know what I mean? Like, there's a list of 15 comics, and someone could be a fan of any one of those people on the list. It's not like they're just coming to see me. So you have to win over people that are not necessarily your fan. You know what I mean? So it's back to that again, which I very desperately craved.
Yeah, and it's a typical internet thing too. The more famous you get, the more people are going to be. I mean, there's going to be people who are going to be going to shows. So a lot of them looking for reasons to laugh, and there's always going to be people who are looking for reasons not to laugh and reasons to, knock you down a peg.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, the whole game is like the whole thing in this comedy thing is to hopefully sell tickets, and that's like,
yeah,
thank God the internet has like come along, and podcasting has been what it is, because it's kind of like raised all tides, you know. Like, we have more arena acts out there than we've ever had. We have more theater acts out there than we ever have, and because those people are doing those huge venues, it opens up the clubs now to people like me who, you know, maybe 20 years ago, before all this happened, I would still probably be like a middle, you know.
mhm. You talked about the internet age and kind of the way that comedy's grown since then, and with the internet being what it is and more receipts and whether it be tweets or whatever, you have these every week. A different comedian finds, say, we dug up a tweet that he sent 10 years ago or a joke he told 15 years ago, and it's led to so much discourse. And one of the things I like about your comedy is that, like, it's just funny for funny's sake, and I mean that as a positive. Like, I don't view you as somebody who's politically charged with
Right.
his material the way that so many people are nowadays. But with that comes, whatever you want to say, special interest groups, what have you, that get butthurt about this stuff. And I wanted to ask, this is a question I've always wanted to ask a comedian. Do you find it harder to be funnier than you did a decade ago?
No, I mean, I think it's actually because of all these things, it's made things edgy again, which is like,
Yeah.
and edgy is such a lame word. I just kind of look at things as like I am who I am. I'm older. Like I remember when Trump was running after Obama left, I had my own like derangement during that time, and I just eventually I just realized like this. I kind of realized really early on that crying about it or even just like making jokes about it on the internet like were it was a lost cause. Like this is even before like bots and shit like that. It's just like you're never going to convince somebody. And also like I was alienating people for things I didn't even necessarily feel that passionately about. So it was just like I don't really give a shit about talking about this stuff. And I don't want to anymore. And it was like, I just kind of grew out of that at some point down the road. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun or funny. Like, I always thought making fun of the president was funny. I mean, SNL's done it since I was a kid. It didn't matter who the hell the president was, we were making fun of it. And then there was like this weird thing where it was like some people hated my guts for if I made fun of the president, and some people loved me. And then the wrong people might have liked me on occasion. And it was like, I just kind of was like, felt gross about it. I'm like, I actually just kind of want to relate to somebody on like a human level, as weird as that sounds. Like I don't really care about your like, because everybody has different circumstances and reasons why they might like this or that when it comes to polarizing things. And I'd rather just like at the end of the day, if the bombs all come falling on us or whatever and we have to like come together, we have to do it on like a human level and not like a fucking political level. So I just kind of like try and relate with people in that sense, and I've kind of shaved everything else out of my, and it has made it harder to write because like as I grow as a person or get older, I guess you could say, I'm still trying to figure out who the hell I am in a lot of ways. And I never really had that problem when I was younger. I kind of like was pretty sure of myself in a lot of ways. And now it's like as I get older, I'm questioning a lot more things about myself, not necessarily the world. So I'm trying to figure out like what I want and who I am as like a middle-aged man at this point. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's kind of, that part's kind of weird and makes it a little bit harder. But I think like these people complaining about stuff, I'd love for somebody to dig up a tweet from mine from a decade ago and try and cancel me. That'd give me some heat. I'd love it.
Yeah, well,
Go
yeah,
search for one.
that is the thing, is that what people don't, I think Shane Gillis is the prime example of this. Sometimes that stuff ends up working out in your favor. Like, I mean, and I think Shane Gillis is brilliant, but I also think that his cancelization, quote unquote, is kind of what made him bigger than it would have had he have ended up landing the SNL
Oh, no
gig.
doubt. I mean, like, if he was on SNL, he would be doing fine. I mean, Shane
Yeah.
is so funny and he would have been great and maybe even a breakout star, but like, he is now more or less an arena act. And, to the point where obviously they brought him back. He's more famous than anybody on that show, and even some of the people that they have on as hosts. So yeah, no, it worked out, and I don't think Shane, if you ask them, I mean, I've not like this is just based off of. I think he would have loved to have been on SNL. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it kind of sucked. I don't think he looks back at it and is like, yeah, man, thank God I was. You know, I think he kind of is still like, not traumatized from it, but like, it was a shitty thing that happened and he had to deal with it. And it was probably very, very, very hard to deal with that. And like people like hating your guts, even though like, and then people being like, fuck them, like, I don't know. It's like I was talking about where if you were doing political commentary kind of, you know what I mean? Because then it does become politicized. I even heard him on Rogan say like Kid Rock was texting him after and like he didn't go hard enough against the libs or whatever. And it was like, it's that kind of shit's so funny to me. But he's just another like I think Shane's a very authentic person, and that's
Yeah.
like pretty much what I think always kind of rises to the top is if you're just like who you are, then nobody can really like shit. I mean, they can shit on you and hate your guts, I guess, for who you are. But like at the end of the day, you are who you are. So it's like if you're trying to be something that you're not, or going out of your way to be this or that and try and like grift something, I think people can sniff that out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about Shane that has made him uh, grow, in terms of popularity is the fact that he's one of the few who does sometimes politically charged or politically adjacent material that is not divisive. Like his Trump impression's just funny, and it can be
Right.
funny from both sides of the aisle. And it's no, it's one of those things I've always wanted to ask comedians about, because I hate, and I'm obviously not a comedian, but I hate when people say comedy is dead. To me, that's like one of the dumbest things a person can. That's like saying food is dead or something. Like it's a thing that always exists. It's always going to evolve. It can change, and I'm sure comedy 10 years from now will be a lot different in the post-Trump age than what it was, in prior to him. But yeah, no, it's I, as somebody who does not consider himself a comedian by any means, but who studies comedy, it's something I've always wanted to ask about. But you, obviously, the first time I got any exposure to you was on Your Mom's House, was on that network with Tom and Christina. And I've always viewed Your Mom's House as a show, as it's a view into people's intrusive thoughts, where everything that you like is in the back of your head that you think about, that you never really talk about, but you just kind of acknowledge. It comes out in terms of the clips and the silliness that is on that show. When you became a part of that network, did you already share Tom's affinity for really fucked up shit, or was that a trait that you had to learn as you went on? Kind of.
Oh no, I think that's why we became friends. Like I've known Tom since like 2013, and I would say like where he was when I met him was like where kind of I am right now. Like, people were coming to see him, but not all the people were there. Just, you know what I'm saying? Like he would sell like half the room would be like super hardcore fans, and then like maybe they'd pay for the other half or whatever. And then like, he had his Netflix special post that, and he kind of then it just kind of like took off after that. But I think I mean like that first weekend I worked with him, like we didn't like it wasn't like I've had weekends with guys that, other comics where I left there, I was like, are we best friends? Do you know what I mean? Like where we did like everything together. When it was with Tom, it was just like a chill weekend, and I had a good time with him, and I did well on the shows, and I was always like a good hang with like no comic was like get him out of the green. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I was always like welcomed in all the green rooms I was ever, So I don't know what happened, but he was like chill. I was chill enough, evidently, to where he was like, "Do you want to come to Orlando with me?" And at that point, I had never flown on a plane. I've only done like regional stuff. So I was like, "Sure, yeah." And then I think like I remember on that trip, it was like we always laughed at like fucked up shit together. Like that is my thing. Like I sometimes even on my podcast, I'll be reading a headline, and in the middle of it, I'll think into my head, I'm like, no one's gonna think this is funny. I don't know why I'm laughing at this head. Like it's like not a particularly funny headline. It's just very fucked up. So I mean, and we used to like send each other links to shit that was like wild stuff, and he always kind of like had these ins to links. Like he showed me so many websites. It's kind of like that friend, like when you were growing up in the early days of the internet, that would be like, here's rotten.com. Have you seen rotten.com? Yeah. Like, and you'd like go to your friend's house on AOL and watch all this weird shit. Like it was like that again, but with, phones and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, we always kind of like had that sort of link together. And we used to have like fucked up conversations about stuff, like serious debates about like some fucked up stuff. And I don't know, we always made each other laugh in that way. So I think, yeah, when he asked me to be a part of the show, we started out by doing like these segments. And the first segment he wanted me to do was like find fucked up porn, like fucked up genres of porn. And that was my first time on the show. I mean, I forget what episode it was or whatever. It was like with Felipe Esparza. But people like some people remember that, and that was like I think like my best appearance on the show was like my very first one. They were like still at their house, and I knew I was going to be working at like the studio once they opened that, but they hadn't at this time, so I was just doing like segments. And then after that, he was like, "Oh, that one was so fun. Now do one about serial killers." So then I came back and did one about serial killers, and that tends to be the one that people remember the most, because some people really found it to be absolutely fucked up, but Tom loves that shit. So like you can't like be too fucked up for him, to be quite honest.
It's a perfect show and a perfect network to me for my generation, because I'm 28, I'm almost 29, and in the age that I've grown up in, there's maybe this speaks to who I am. There's nothing that really, like, I'm desensitized to everything. So like I find that shit funny as hell. Like and I love when you guys have guests on who kind of break it down. Like Louis, this was after you left the show, did such a great job of breaking down Robert Paul Champagne and like
Right.
just kind of his whole origin and like upbringing and how he came to be. So I find most of that stuff hilarious. Has there been anything that's been on the show where you were like, dude, I can't even find the humor in this. This is too messed up.
I mean, not that I can't find the humor in it. Some of the like the live shows, I mean,
Yeah.
it's the gory shit that like kind of like I I'm not exactly a sensitive person, but like I just can't watch like a guy get his dick stepped on by like a stiletto or like there was
Yeah.
ones where like guys were like doing drills into their dick. I mean, it was like sticking stuff in the pee hole, that kind of shit
Yeah.
really like that kind of shit really fucks with my it just makes me squeezy or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
like I don't really have any like sensitivities to like, and I was thinking about me and my buddy Matt that I was talking about earlier, we were talking about this actually because he just like witnessed like his wife works for a hotel in DC, and outside of the hotel there was like a shooting and she had to like see it on the security footage to like show it to the cops, and then we were just and he was like, yeah, I caught it, and he's like, I didn't really feel anything. Like what? And I was like, yeah man, because we watch TV. I mean, like it's just like all the TV show, like they do a pretty good job at making it look like someone gets shot when someone gets shot on these things now. You know what I'm saying? So we see one in actuality almost, you know, through another screen, and it's like, oh, I'm watching. Like I was like, it's almost like natural to be desensitized to it. I feel like, you know.
It's so bizarre how like my generation is the one that's often labeled for being really soft when I feel like in reality there is like it's kind of the inverse of that with certain pieces of media, at least. Like I remember when the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie came out and like you're reading all this stuff about it's incel culture, it's inciting violence, and I saw it and I'm like, I see worse stuff, like more disturbing things on the news. Like this is not like I didn't
Of
view
course.
this as anything, but there's another generation that viewed it as this problem.
It's kind of always been that way. I feel like. I mean, every time, like, I mean, when I was a little kid, it was like CDs are like, you know, Limp Bizkit's making people angry or corn
Marilyn
or whatever.
Manson, yeah.
Marilyn Manson, yeah, and it was like, yeah, I mean, it's like dark or whatever, but it's almost like poetry. You know what I mean? They're like
Yeah.
doing like metaphors and shit. Like it's not like I don't know. It was so funny, and like that back then though, it was like, you know, Tipper Gore and all that kind of shit. You know what I mean? It was more conservative, religious, right people. Even though Tipper Gore was a Democrat, but like she was teaming up. There was like almost like this non-biased thing that Congress was trying to get like these. You know, they got the label put on there, which actually made shit cooler.
Yeah.
But you know, and there was always video games and stuff, and they always tried to blame those. And you know, I think there's just always going to be something that comes out in the. It's like you can't blame. Now there's a school shooting every day. It's almost like it's the other way around. It's like life is going to start influencing everybody and making them do wild shit, you know?
Yeah, there's always a scapegoat in media. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's like Grand Theft Auto caused Columbine and shit like that. There's people. I think it's just people's curiosity with that stuff. If you do a deep enough dive, you can find a connection if you want to. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I play MLB The Show obsessively. You don't see me out there like exercising.
Yeah, I'm not gonna throw 100 next week. Like I'm pretty.
Yeah,
I'm content just watching the games. No, you're right. I mean, there's always influence. Yeah. But you know, talking about just going back to bringing up my generation, you know, I've talked with content creators about this as well. You know, we've seen so many comedians pop off in the TikTok generation. It even kind of goes back to Vine, even when that was a thing, but even more so with TikTok. You know, attention spans are shorter than they've ever been. People watch videos 30 seconds to a minute long at a time. When you're doing your act, are you cognizant to that? Like, do you try to shorten things up, or are you content keeping things long form because that's, you know, kind of how you came up?
I definitely don't think about that when I'm doing like live stand up. I mean, to the detriment of myself mostly. I mean, like, you know, my manager and all these people would love it if I was popping off on TikTok, you know, because it does. I mean, the opposite of, or not the opposite, but like the difference between Vine and what's happening now with like Instagram Reels and TikTok is like these things are translating to ticket sales.
Yeah.
Whereas Vine kind of did for like a hot second, but none of those people were able to like maintain it. That there's a very few. I think Ryan O'Flanagan started on Vine and a couple other people, but it was hard for people to like keep that heat going. And it seems, and maybe it'll happen with TikTok too. I don't know. I mean, we're kind of in the like new age of it, and there's a lot of people out there selling tickets based off of being popular on TikTok. But you can see a full joke on TikTok. It's not like Vine where it was like 6 seconds, you know? So, I mean, there's that aspect. But also, it's created this like, I think the crowd, it's interesting. The crowd work wave, I feel like, is kind of crashing a little bit because of the overexposure to it. Like now I've seen people come to shows and be like kind of annoyed that there's crowd work. Some people are really still like fascinated with it, and it is like a magic trick, and the people who are great at it, I could watch them do it every single time. But I think people are like, I want to go see like someone tell jokes. Like there's like that element to it too. Like people are getting sick of the crowd work thing
Yeah,
because
no,
of the oversaturation.
and I understand that. I think with Vine too, what happened with Vine is that I think Anthony Jeselnik talked about this. Is that a bunch of Vine stars who weren't comedians tried to become comedians during that age, and it didn't work. Whereas with TikTok, you have actual people who do stand up who've just become more popular, sharing their act on social media. And I could be wrong about this, but I also think we're getting like a new age of sketch comedy too, which is kind of unique. I feel like with stuff like Gillian Keeves and I think because this is one thing that drives me nuts about SNL. Sketch comedy is short form. It should be like 3 minutes at a time. It's not 7 to 10 minute long sketches. Like, so like I even like, the guys that I interviewed from Bart, like Nick and KB, those guys are hilarious. They do short form TikTok length videos that just make you laugh. That's exciting to me just in the sense that, I've been a fan of sketch comedy for a long time. Is that a lane that you've like tried to dip your toes into in the past?
I mean, I've always appreciated it. I don't know that I'm a good actor or not. I have never even really tried. Doing stand up, I've always been like trying to come from like a sense of myself. So it makes it tough to like write in other voices. Like it's just something I've never really like dived because I've spent so much time writing for my own voice and for myself on stage. So, I mean, like, I've had sketch ideas. I've helped Tom with sketches and, like, sent him ideas and stuff like that. And we've come up with, like, little bits and stuff like that. But I mean, I wouldn't mind getting involved in something like that. I think it's pretty cool what's going on. And, like, you compared it to SNL. And, like, every generation has had, like, people be like, SNL's dead. And it always isn't. It
There's
just evolves.
close to it all the time.
And I'm sure they'll end up, and it kind of makes me sad the way you said it. It's like, yeah, it kind of probably will evolve into becoming more like bite-sizable sketches and things like that. But that also makes me like kind of bummed out. I don't know. It's kind of like music, like now people are literally writing songs so that they can have like the hook be like a TikTok length hook. You know what I mean? Like if you don't get to the hook within the first like minute and a half, I forget, there's like a new theory on it where it's like you have to like songs can't even be like 2.5 minutes anymore. Like, which is crazy. The songs used to be like 4 minutes or what have you, 3.5 or something. But now if it's like over 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes, but they're like, nah, it's too long.
Crazy. Yeah. And I've noticed that the big one I've noticed that with is movie trailers, where if you watch sometimes the trailer, the second Joker movie that's coming out, they released a teaser for the teaser. They released a 30-second snippet of the trailer before the trailer was released, just to make sure, just because they were afraid 2.5 minutes might be a little bit too long for people. We got.
Well, I don't even think it's that. I think they're just milking the fact that like we have to tweet about something. You know what I mean? Or post something. So they're like, if we're gonna post something, let's do like 3 days of it. It's just like, and so we can just cut it up and be like, here's one still from the from the trailer. They can get all the way down to that basically at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, like some of the trailers for movies, like, I found myself maybe not even having like an attention span, I guess. I don't know. But I saw that Civil War movie, and I feel like the entire movie was in the trailer. Like any fun part of the movie was in the trailer,
Yeah. Well, that's been an issue that I feel like movie trailers have run into for a while, where they give away way too much of the fucking story, where you feel like you've seen it before you actually go into the film, which is, it's a weird balance. You'd think they'd cut back on that with attention spans being shorter. You're in LA right now, right?
I am indeed.
Okay, and so one thing I think that's fascinating about you is that you live in LA, but obviously being from Buffalo, you have a lot of East Coast connections, and you've performed all over the country. Is there a certain section of the country where you feel like your brand of comedy appeals to the most?
Oh yeah, I mean, I love like the Rust Belt.
Mhm.
I love like Pittsburgh. I loved Chicago. That was fun. I haven't been to Detroit in many years, but I'd imagine it would be good there. But people are people. I mean, like, yeah, sure. I've gone to like San Francisco, and it's a little harder sometimes to just like get a laugh out of something kind of cheap or whatever. Like that they aren't going to be like, whoa, he said like one of those words. You know what I mean, or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, it's still like the same type of people want to come see me, perform or what have you. Like I've had some of the best shows of my life up in like Seattle.
Hmm.
The first place I ever sold out a show was Seattle, and they were never like clutching pearls or anything like that when I've gone up there, and I am going up there again. So hopefully I can sell some tickets again. But I really just think like honestly like people everywhere are people, and like if they know what I do and they come out, it's like people that are buying a ticket to see me, I guess. If they did it in, Orlando and they met somebody who bought one in San Francisco, they would be friends. Do you know what I'm saying? They're
Yeah.
similar mindsets. So I feel like there's just like enough. And I don't know if that's like a broad enough thing where I could like, keep this going and be like, famous or something one day, but I know that at least like there's this core group of people that are like-minded like me and just want to have fun and don't give a shit, and they come out, and I think like no matter where they are in the country, if they were just thrown in one thing, they would be friends with each other.
Yeah, we probably I'm guilty of this as well. Like put these labels on it. Funny is going to play regardless of location. Like if funny's going to carry. But yeah,
Right.
I don't. Maybe it's being from Michigan and having like ties to Detroit. Like I would not say that I would not call you a blue collar comic, but I feel like that type of comedy that you
No,
do.
I actually appreciate that. I'm not like, blue collar, like I'm not like
Right, I thought you meant like
Ron White or whatever.
Foxworthy or what? Yeah, that wasn't the
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Even though I mean Ron White now is like, I mean the guy, he's like the Dos Equis man up there. It's fucking, he's like, talk about an evolution. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. I like it's like what do they call it? Lunchbox or
Bring your
whatever the
lunch
fuck
pail to
it.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of shit. Like it's like, I mean, I'm not like a rough blue collar type guy. I don't know how to do manual labor or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I have simple joys, and I think it relates with enough people that just want to drink a beer and like get a little high and just talk shit. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
The word's relatable. I mean, that's what
yeah,
people look for in comedy. I want to ask you some sports questions because I know you're a huge sports
please.
fan. We've talked about it before. You and Kirk Metzger did a really funny bit where you made fun of Jonathan Gannon, the
Yeah,
Cardinals
yeah,
coach,
yeah.
and his weird roboticness. Who in sports right now, outside of maybe him, who in sports right now do you think is the easiest person for comics to make fun of?
Ooh, I mean, I don't even think John Gannon. That guy actually like surprised me.
Yeah, I know he actually ended up doing an all right job.
He actually was pretty good. Yeah, I know. And they seemed to get behind him. And
Mhm.
but yeah, no, I mean, he had just like he was just a wild guy. I think. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is definitely stepping into that realm. And as a Bills fan, I hate the Jets, and I hate them like a child hates his little brother. You know what I'm saying? Like they've never really done anything to me. They're in my division. I'm not rooting for them. Other than the Rex Ryan years, like they've been nothing. And I knew when Aaron Rodgers went there, I'm like, this is gonna suck and it's gonna be so funny. And I didn't expect it to go like
Two
tinfoil hat, like he's gonna be the vice president for RFK. Like I didn't expect it to be, the injury, like you just said, like, you know, 4 plays and then the ACL. Or whatever it was, the Achilles or whatever. I didn't expect any of this. And it's been just absolutely gloriously Jets. It's been just like Jets to a T. It's so funny.
people, and having been around, with my previous job, a lot of New York people, the Jets the Jets and the Mets are the same organization. Like
The
people,
Mets, did you see their jerseys they just dropped today?
are the City Connect, are they pretty cool or are they bad?
They are Yankees jerseys.
Oh, are they really? Are their fans
You
pissed off
got to
about it?
look it up. They're everywhere. I mean, it is. They made pinstripes on them.
See, that's why, man. I love Mets fans. They're like they're a lot. They remind me a lot of Detroit Lions fans prior to like this year, where it's just the expectation of misery and the constantly received trauma that where it's just like we know this probably isn't going to work, but we're going to hold out hope. We're going to hold out hope. This pitcher looks great. Okay, he's going to get injured, type of thing. Yeah, no, I mean that's obviously a good one with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, one guy who I having been in his sphere for so long now, obviously he's moved on, was Jim Harbaugh to me, where Jim Harbaugh was like a Simpsons character's representation of what a football coach is, and which was awesome the last 3 years, like when they were winning championships for a minute. I mean, it was people around here don't understand is for a period of time he couldn't take out his trash without it being like a media circus. I mean, and he's
In
just
Michigan?
oh yeah. I mean,
Because I was thinking, I mean, like, I just remember when he was the 49ers head coach and he, like, went to the Super Bowl with Kaepernick and it was like, then he got just, like, fired pretty quickly there. And I was kind of like, what happened there? Is he just too much of a hardo or something? And then, like,
well, what it is he has a very, how do I put this, unique personality that
sure.
that wears on people, I think, pretty quickly.
He
And
broke Jim Kelly's jaw. I think he's cool.
yeah, no, I mean, and the thing is, honestly, the players love him. Players adored him, man. Like, especially, near the end, like the amount of guys he put in the NFL and like the team they had last year, it was incredible. But like, he's unwavering in how he goes about things, which to a lot of people can be charming, but can be something that wears on people very quickly. Well, the reason it became such a huge story in Michigan was the Michigan connection, was that he was this great NFL coach.
Right.
It was like, some out of a movie where it's like the old coach goes back to his old stomping ground. I mean, people were making like hype videos and like, please come to Michigan, Jim,
Sure.
videos on the internet. And then when he did, it was outside of maybe Saban going to Bama, maybe Urban Meyer to Ohio State, probably the biggest, like, this is a perfect fit, guaranteed like college football hire ever. Now, for the first 6 years, that wasn't the case, but then obviously they turned things around.
It's like the opposite of Frank Reich. Like he was like the first ever quarterback for the Carolina Panthers organization. Like when they became a franchise, like Bill Polian brought him over. And I think in like the expansion draft, or I don't even know what it was, but he then became the coach and gets fired like with the season before the season even ends.
Dude, I don't think they were halfway done. I think they were 8 games in. I think they canned him. It was that.
I can't believe it. It was crazy.
David Tepper is a crazy person. I think that's why. I think he had 5 coaches in 3 years. I think like something insane like that, which I would. Yeah. As an outsider, I almost consider fun just because it's like the way that you would manage a team on Madden, but it's got to be the most maddening thing. Well, it's got to be the most maddening thing as a fan, the way that they've fallen off.
Sure.
Especially because they had a run there where they were pretty darn good with Cam. Another team that's had a pretty good run here is obviously your Bills, and I'm not going to say the Bills are at a crossroads because Josh Allen. You guys are in the best situation possible where you will be competitive as long as your quarterback remains healthy. I mean, Josh Allen.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the Diggs thing. Like
that was going to be my question is like, where are you at with that?
Well, so as a Bills fan, you were talking about the Mets fans and how like they have this like misery and everything like that. That's what I always kind of like. The Mets are always like must see TV for me. I don't really like take stock in them as like being like a fan of them or anything like that. And when I moved to Cleveland, it was kind of the same thing. Like they had like this misery attachment to the Browns, and at the time the Cavs hadn't won the championship when I lived there, but they had no championships. But they were always like negative about it. In Buffalo, we knew we sucked. Like when we sucked for most of my adult life and my childhood, we knew it, but we just had fun with it. We're like, yeah, we suck, but like it was so much fun. And that's what always made the Bills my favorite. And then, now that we're good, it's like scary. You know what I mean? Like the last couple of years have been like definitely a lot of weird highs that I hadn't experienced in my adult life. And then the feeling that like pain again. And you're like, fuck, man, I have not felt this in a minute. And there was like a couple of years there, like when we lost to the Chiefs, I was kind of just like, hey, man, we made it to the AFC Championship. Like that lasts like 1 year. And then like you're like, well, now I want to get to the fucking Super Bowl. Yeah. But when we got there, I wasn't that sad, but I was, I was obviously sad, but I was more like, I can't wait till next year. It's always been, as a Bills fan, it's always been that. And I unironically tell people we're going to go 17-0 every fucking season. I've
Yeah.
said it since we were 9 and whatever, but 9-7 or whatever. But with Diggs being gone, and it must have been something going on that they just couldn't, because he had 1 year left, and it cost $4 million more than it would have just to have him around. And I mean, when you look at the production that he had during our like stretch of wins at the end of the season last season, he was a ghost. I forget what
Yeah.
they compared him to, like a third receiver on the Giants statistically, like the numbers that he had. And if the offense is going to go through James Cook, and we're not going to make him like the primary target, he's going to get upset about it, then go have fun in Houston, where, by the way, I think he's the third receiver in
Yeah, he
Houston. I
will
mean,
be.
Nico Collins and Tank Dell, I mean, he's not going to be getting all the targets there, and he's basically alone. I mean, they have him for this season, and that's it. He's not going to stay there. He's not going to enjoy his time with Houston unless they like win the Super Bowl or something, but he's not going to enjoy being like a third option.
Yeah, I mean he's gonna have to humble himself a bit if he wants to. To me, I view it as a win-win really for both sides, because I mean last year the team that won the Super Bowl last year had like the weakest crop of receivers maybe that's ever won a Super Bowl, and they still but they did it with a generational quarterback, and obviously you had Kelsey as the tight end. It's one of those things where I think he won't be a wide receiver one like he was with Buffalo. But I think that Texans offense has the potential to be really explosive with
Yeah, they
Stroud.
got a Ferrari. I mean, it
Yeah,
is going to be crazy.
yeah, it is insane to me that CJ Stroud never beat Michigan. I mean, he was the quarterback that scared me the most of all of those Ohio State quarterbacks. And like, yeah, and he was always good, but yeah, now he's got weapons there. Like I think Diggs,
Same with
Wilson,
Marvin Harrison. It's crazy that they never beat Michigan. That's like, I mean, but when they were beating them with like guys that like Troy Smith, I mean, I was like,
Todd Beckman. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it was, yeah, I know. And no, I mean, look, beating your rival is always fun, but like those Ohio State teams the last 3 years were stacked offensively. I mean, they had generational skill position players, and we got Mike McDonald was our D coordinator in 21. He's now the head coach of the Seahawks. He basically laid the entire blueprint of like, here's how you contain Ohio State. Like, yeah, they're going to hit their big plays, but nothing over the top, field goals in the red zone. And then Jesse Minter came in and instituted the exact same system, and they were able to kind of contain him the last few years. What you bring up about the Bills and what you bring up about fandom in general, I totally agree with. Where when you're bad, you can accept it and have fun with it. Like, dude, the Lions for my entire life until a year and a half ago were like that, where it's like, okay, they're gonna find a way to fuck this up. Oh my god, they fucked it up, and it's like, okay, whatever, we'll move on to next week. Whereas, like, if you would have told me 5 years ago that the Lions were going to be in a dogfight in the NFC Championship game with the Niners, I'd be like, dude, hell yeah, let's do it. But then seeing the way they lost that lead, I was pissed. Like, we should have been in the fucking Super Bowl. So no, you're right. Now there is a fear that comes with success, because like now I want to win the Super Bowl. Like, and now I want to win. Like, what I do with the Tigers, I
get a
love
little
the Tigers.
taste.
Yeah, and it's like what I do with the Tigers is similar. Where I love the Tigers, I want them to be successful, but there's kind of like this. Yeah, if we make the playoffs, awesome. But at some point, like, we could be making a deep run again. It's like now I'm actually in danger of getting my heart broken, as opposed to just being like, okay, you shrug your shoulders at it.
Well, the Sabres, my favorite hockey team, I mean, what's so funny is through my whole life, like growing up as like in high school and middle school, high school, college, the Sabres were amazing and the Bills sucked. And the Bills had a crazy playoff drought, longest in the NFL for a while there. And the Sabres were like, when I was, between the ages of 15 and 25, were like one of the best teams in the NHL. We didn't win the Stanley Cup, but we went to one. We went to the Eastern Conference Finals a bunch. We won a couple President's trophies in that span of time. We have not been to the playoffs since 2011. It has superseded the Bills drought by a mile. It is we currently, I think, are tied with the Jets as being one of the two major big four sports teams. We have the longest playoff droughts currently going right now. So the Jets, if they go to the playoffs this year, which I don't think they will, but if they go this year, they will then beat. I need the Sabres to go to the playoffs before the fucking Jets go, just so we don't hold that record. But it's been since 2011, since Terry Pagula bought the team, they have not made the playoffs once. And my buddy's like, I've been married twice since the Sabres went to the playoffs. It's crazy.
That passage of time shit scares you because you don't, when you're going through it, you're just like, okay, maybe next year. And you're like, holy shit, maybe next year. I've been saying that for 10 years. Like, I'm not getting any, like, I'm going to be in my 30s watching the Tigers, fight to get above 500. Again, the parallels to Detroit are very similar, where the Red Wings went through that insane run. I mean, they were a legit dynasty, and then broke.
Yes, of course.
Broke the
NHL. Scotty Bowman, Steve Fedorov, the Fedorov era, the fucking Sergei Fedorov, Steve Yzerman, and all
they
those dudes.
They broke the NHL record for it might have been the all four major pro sports record of consecutive playoff appearances. In the meantime, the Lions were nothing. The idea that the Lions are now the hottest ticket in town is something I wasn't sure I'd ever see.
It's great.
No, it's awesome. And they're like the cool team that's like become people's B team too. Like people love Dan Campbell. They love it's a fun team to root for.
As someone who went through this, not but 4 years ago or so, where everyone, because I would wear, I live in LA, and I wear Bills hats all the time, and people would come up to me and they'd be like, "Hey man, the Bills, that's fun," because it's like they don't see that shit out here, and they're like, again, we became that everybody's B team kind of thing, and eventually they turn on you a little bit.
I mean, remember in the NBA when like the Warriors were like this jump start? Oh man, they got these really good shooters, and this guy from
I remember I rooted for the Warriors in the finals, and I was so psyched when they won, and then I was like, fuck them. Like, I hope Cleveland wins. I completely flip-flopped.
They had the strangest arc of any team ever, where they went from very likable to insanely unlikable to like kind of likable again after like the COVID year and everything. But
now they don't even make the playoffs, right? I mean, I don't really follow basketball that great, but
I don't really either. But no, they didn't. They had the play-in game and they got crushed. You're obviously, my main sport is baseball. I know you're a big baseball guy. Do you have, who's your favorite like player currently that you have the opportunity to watch that you tune in for?
I just drunkenly tweeted last night that Chris Taylor's maybe my favorite baseball player, because I was playing. He has been playing like dog shit this season, but and I don't even think he's like in the starting rotation half the time. But I watched him hit a walk-off home run in the wild card game. I think it was against the Cardinals. I went to that game, and I just saw it go into the night sky. And I always love like Swiss Army knife guys, like they can play any position and they're fast. Like on the Tigers, I love Zach McKinstry. Like he's like my favorite guy on the Tigers. There's guys like that I just like start to get obsessed with. Like, he's not so much of a Swiss Army knife guy, but I love fast guys like Joe Adell, and like obviously Ellie De La Cruz is like maybe one of my favorites right now. And I made a futures bet on the Reds winning the World Series this year, plus 5,000. I don't know why, because I was just like, they're so young and fast, and they've got they are fun as hell. And I've always kind of liked the Reds, but I feel weird claiming any team because I really didn't start following baseball until like I moved to LA, I guess, 2017, because I didn't have a day job anymore. I just was like, I want a hobby, and I think baseball's kind of cool, but I never really had time to like watch it and follow it. And I found it to be like this sort of lesson in gratitude, as weird as that sounds, where it's like I get to watch a baseball game at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday. And like when they started doing the pitch clock thing, I was kind of like, who wants games to be shorter? I mean, we get to be at these games. Like, people are like, I'd go to a game, but I don't want to be there for 4.5 hours. Like, what else do you have to do? Like, this is awesome. We're outside. We're drinking beers. Like, why wouldn't you want this to last forever? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I get that. And I've come to love the pitch clock because
I have to, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And I get the point you're making where it definitely impacts when you attend games, because that's about the experience. You're right. I do want to be there for 4 hours walking around the park. I don't care. But especially a guy who has watched, sat through every game of a 114 loss season, I'm okay with games being a little bit faster sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like if I was a Dodger fan or an Astros fan, I might feel a little bit differently. But yeah, when I don't know, like Daniel Norris is getting lit up in the third inning, I kind of want things to speed up a little bit. We have seen in the past most of them not so successful, but some athletes venture into the comedy realm. Is there any current athlete that you feel like could potentially be a good stand-up?
I don't know about stand-up is like such a thing where like there's of course people that can just get up on a stage and talk. Like Pat McAfee's tried stand up and he's had like varying degrees of success. He could obviously get up on stage, and it's just like, it's stand up is more like the monotony of like doing it you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know if anyone's trying to do that. There are people that have definitely like dip their toes in for sure. As far as just pure funny dudes, like Marshawn Lynch, I got to, when he was on the Bills, I got to go in the locker room and talk to him all the time, and he was hilarious. Ryan Fitzpatrick is super funny. Like, he was like underrated funny when he was just like our backup quarterback to Trent Edwards. He would, I would get to talk to him because no one else gave a shit about talking to him. So I would talk to him forever, and he was so funny. But there's like other guys, like, I mean, podcasting has opened up the world of like personalities of some of these guys. Like, they're doing podcasts now. Like, I mean, on Barstool, you have like a bunch of current athletes
Yeah.
doing podcasts too, right? Like, so, and then even off that, like I became kind of buddies with Tyler Glass now, and he's so funny. That guy's like hilarious. He just loves comedy though. He comes to the comedy store and just like stays all night and watches Don Barris at the end of the night, and gets the whole experience. He's just a big comedy fan, but he's like super funny guy. And I'm sure there's even more, I mean, there's quirky guys, like Zach Greinke or whatever, like guys like that, where you like hear stories where they're hilarious, and that guy can't necessarily do that. It's not like he's going to go on stage and like replicate that.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. They had like, I think like Julian Edelman was doing something. Like a couple of these guys, they come to the comedy store. There was a time when Travis Kelce was coming to the comedy store a bunch, and I thought maybe he was going to start like dipping his toes into something like that. But they do little roast things here and there and
Mhm.
stuff. I know during the Netflix festival's coming up here at the beginning of May. Netflix is a joke festival, and they're doing a roast of Tom Brady, and I think Gronk is like on the panel, and
Right.
a couple of other people. That are former athletes. I forget who else. There's like probably like Shaq or some shit. I don't fucking know. But like even Shaq, like another guy like that. Like there's a bunch of Charles Barkley's hilarious, one of the most
Yes.
funny broadcasters ever.
Ever.
I don't even like basketball, and I'll watch him talk about it. So
Yeah. No, Gronk, I can totally see being in retirement to the NFL what Shaq has been to the NBA, where he's the ambassador for a million different products. Like, you just see him on TV doing
sure,
it.
he's
And
already
Marsh,
kind of doing that, but they tried to do that with like him being like on the broadcast, and I guess he's getting better at it, and they're bringing him back out. But there was like a time there where he was just not doing well. Like they put him on the panel like in the pregame.
yeah.
And he was just not like doing great. But what do you think Brady's going to be like as a play-by-play guy?
My guess, I think he's going to be terrible.
He's going to be bland. I think
Yeah.
he'll be fine, but he'll be bland, which maybe is going to be nice because I'm the Tony Romo thing. I cannot have another one of those.
Well, but
If
I would agree with you there, but isn't the problem is I really like Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olson together.
love them.
I think he's taking Greg Olson's spot.
He is. And Greg
Yeah.
Olson is great. And I remember like I
Awesome.
was just watching with somebody who doesn't really pay attention to those things. They're like, and they even said, they're like, who's this broadcast team? And I was like, I told them, like, this is probably one of the best ones. Like, I love Jim Nance, but Tony Romo is like, ruins Jim Nance somehow. That's like you have to go above and beyond to ruin Jim Nance. Like, it's crazy. It's actually crazy. And I don't know. I mean, Brady's been removed from the game a couple of years now. And you notice with Romo, the more he gets removed from knowing who these players are, like having played against them and studied their playbooks as a quarterback, the more he's getting removed from those teams and doesn't know the schemes and stuff, you're actually seeing through him now. Like he's not like studying as hard, and you can actually tell he can't guess the plays anymore. He's screwing up that kind of thing. So he's kind of lost his fastball a little bit.
Yeah.
And he should be a little more subtle, and he's not. I think Brady will be subtle enough and just kind of bland enough where no one will really give a shit either way.
He won't steamroll anybody. And I've seen Brady in long form interviews. I mean, he's obviously a very well spoken guy. He's a smart guy. Like I would love to listen about, Tom Brady of all people talk about quarterbacking, obviously. But that's another thing where it's like the short attention span works. It's play by play, short form. Here's how you analyze this play. Here's how you analyze this player. I just don't know if he'll fit that mold, especially replacing somebody who I do like as much as Greg Olson. You brought up Beast Mode as a prime example. He's like gotten himself like actually into like comedy acting, and people say he's like great. He's like he's good improv.
Yeah, he's
improviser.
really good.
Yeah,
I mean, he was always just so funny. I would ask him just we would do this thing where we'd go in and ask like the Bills questions, like little quirky questions, nothing serious, and the audience, we'd give them multiple choice, like what did they say? And oftentimes, some of these guys, they don't have a great personality or whatever, they're not being funny, they're kind of shy or whatever, and they would say like a obvious answer, and we would just put in different. But Marshawn Lynch would just say the funniest shit every time. It's like I would just use all of his I mean, he was so funny.
Yeah,
I put a montage together on YouTube that's on my YouTube channel of just like crazy answers that he gave me for things.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's only audio though. Back then I didn't think I mean, this is like 2006 or whatever, so it's
Yeah.
like we weren't videoing anything.
Yeah, the
Like
radio did.
idiots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last question, and this show in large part is I try to get a gauge on people's confidence and what they feel about themselves and the profession that they're in. So I always throw a question like this out there. Do you think that you're a funny guy?
I think so. I mean, I hate saying nice things about myself, to be quite honest. It's not that I hate it. I have a hard time doing it. I have very negative self talk as they say these people that don't have like, what's it called, internal monologue. I'm like, wow, man, I'm jealous of those people because my internal monologue
You
is
and me both, man.
so
Yeah.
mean to me. But and it's like it's gotten me kind of far, and it's also been to my detriment, obviously. And I think I'm funny enough where it's like I've gotten this far in this whole thing. Can I get further? I hope so, because I have to live another however many years. But if I can't, I did it this far, and I'm like, I can't. If I were to tell like 16-year-old me what I was doing right now, he would be so excited and psyched. And I think that's really cool. And I try to remember that like every time I get in a pickle or whatever.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, and I think we're probably very similar in that yeah, the internal monologue and self-esteem stuff can definitely get to you, but you got to take a step back sometimes. Well, man, I mean, it's been awesome like getting to know you these last several years and following your
Yeah,
stuff.
you're the man, dude. I'm glad you're still doing the show. This is awesome, and you're doing a good job. And I love seeing when you get the ball players on. So
Thank you, man. Well,
keep
I
having
appreciate
them.
it. Yeah, hit me up if you got a show in Detroit, or maybe I'll get down to Chicago when you're down there.
Yeah, no doubt.
Have you ever been to Comerica Park?
Never. I would love to. I'm trying to go to all the ballparks. I've been
Me
to
too.
8 now or so, and I'm hoping when I'm in Chicago I can go to. Last time I was in Chicago when you were there, I couldn't get out to. Wasn't there? There were games that the White Sox were having
They were
against
playing
Detroit,
Tigers were playing it guaranteed.
but they were playing while my shows were happening,
Right.
so I couldn't do it then. They weren't playing on Sunday, otherwise I would have gone. And the Cubs were out of town. But yeah, no, I mean, every time I go to a place, I have it set up. I'm going to Houston in June, and I'm going to definitely go to an Astros game. And I think I might go to a Phillies game this year, even though I've already been to what is it called? Bank of America or Citizens Bank. Yeah, I get the banks confused.
Yeah. Well, because there's Great American Ballpark, which is based off Great American Bank. There's multiple banks.
There's also Great American Ballpark, the Cincinnati Reds, obviously ballpark. But then what is it? It's like the Milwaukee one. I've been to Milwaukee.
Oh, that's right. They
the
changed
Family Field or whatever it's called. Great Family Field or something.
Yeah, Family American Field or something like that. Well, Comerica.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, have you been to any of the Chicago ones?
Neither. I went to see the Cubs though. It was why I drafted Suzuki in my fantasy league pretty early, because I went to see the Cubs play spring training. And who the hell did they play against? Can't remember. It wasn't the Tigers, was it?
In spring training?
No, it couldn't have been. I forget who they played against. It was back when I was in Chandler back in March, but I watched Jan Gomes hit 2 home runs and Suzuki hit 2 home runs, but back to back. Like they just went up, and I was like, man, Cubs are raking. So I've drafted both those guys on my fantasy team.
Yeah,
and Bellinger hit a home run. Who the hell did they play? God, I thought it was the Tigers.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was. I thought that they were in different. I
don't know.
Think, no, because if it was in Chandler, the Tigers play in Florida, so they wouldn't have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, no. I mean, I've been to both. It's true what they say. Like Wrigley is obviously the much nicer ballpark, but yes. I do kind of love White Sox fans. Like they're like they're aware of what their team is. They're pessimistic as shit. Like I totally understand it.
I feel like they were like hot up and comers, like
bro,
two years ago. I mean, Tim Anderson and
I was driving like bandwagon being like, this team's going to dominate. And every one of their guys fell off. Like they started great, and then they either got traded or Giolito got injured or Anderson. There was a period of time where we could not get Tim Anderson out. He just murdered the Tigers. And now last year he's one of the worst players in the league. Yeah, I know their player development is, I think, kind of.
It's so crazy on baseball. I've noticed, like, because I've been following closely since like 2017, 2018, and it's so crazy to me how many players can like pop up. Like, I feel like when Javier Baez was on the Cubs, he was like, they were like El Mago, and he was like doing crazy shit, and everyone was like sad when he left the Cubs, and then he was on Detroit. Now people are like, get Javier Baez out of here. I feel like it's crazy. It happened with who the hell were we just talking about? But
Bellinger in LA.
Yeah, like there's so many people like that though. I feel like
it's a hard game. It humbles you. Yeah, and Javi was one that was always, because of how often he swings at like everything, was always kind of a candidate for regression. Now he regressed way quicker than I expect. I thought we'd get like 1 or 2 good years out of him. We got 0. But look, I could talk to you about this all day, man. And
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it's all good.
Does that happen though with players? I wanted to ask you, does that happen with players though in baseball? Am I going to notice that more? There's like a cliff that they hit and they just kind of like drop off completely?
Sometimes. And there's certain ones, like as the guy I talked to last week, Bailey, like if you're a huge stat dork like me, you can kind of pick up on things. Some players are, even throughout an entire season, just lucky, or 2 seasons with batted ball data where they don't hit the ball hard, but for some reason they're finding the outfield grass. So yeah, no, it does happen. I mean, the fall offs of the guys we're talking about, those are pretty rare. Usually declines are pretty gradual, where it's okay. Like Mike Trout, he's off to a hot start this year, but like he's got this chronic back problem. There was a period of time where he's the best player in the world, and while he's still great, we're seeing him slowly kind of decrease from the apex of where he was. Usually that's more like it, but sometimes, another guy that was like that for us was Miguel Cabrera, where Cabrera for a decade you couldn't get him out. He was everything you wanted to hit, or batting average, power. He was getting on base. He was hitting home runs. And then there was just 1 year in 2017 where everything dropped off significantly. And we're all kind of like, well, okay, that was one bad year. He might get it back. And the other thing too is just health. I mean, that's what killed him. Yeah. If you got a chronic back problem, or like a leg issue or a shoulder thing, and you can't, get those hands around as quickly, like you're just not going to be as effective. But and obviously pitchers are a completely different animal with Tommy John. Sometimes guys just don't. I mean, sometimes you just don't have it anymore. But no, it's not. Those are extreme examples, but there's decline all throughout the league. It's a very tough sport to predict. I would say even harder than any of the other major ones, where you have a general, like, pending something disastrous, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be good for a long time. Like, just as long as they have a healthy Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
A team like look, the Astros right now are off to a terrible start. Like, who could see that coming with that roster?
Right.
But if guys, like, they got this bullpen that everyone said was going to be the best in baseball, and they've all struggled. You can't predict that. Like, they were elite a year ago. So yeah, it's tough to predict. But yeah, man, hit me up when you're if you're ever back in Detroit, we can work something out.
For sure.
Promote all your stuff. Thanks again for doing this, man. And I'll talk to you soon. Appreciate
thanks for having me. And just thejoshpotter.com is where you can find all my dates. Thanks,
for
dog.
Sure. And I'll link to it. Yep. Appreciate it.
Cool.
That was great. I appreciate Josh joining the show. I mean, it's the first time I've done an interview with a comedian, and having seen many interviews with comedians, I feel like very often it's easy to default into just getting them to do their act like they're like a wound up toy. But I've seen Josh's stuff. He's an incredibly smart guy. He's a funny guy, obviously. He's a comedian. It kind of goes without saying. So I asked him some stuff he probably hadn't been asked before. At least I hope so. And it seemed like he appreciated it. And I sure as hell appreciate him coming on to my show. So if you're watching this on YouTube, like I said, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those subscribers up. Let's get those watch hours up. Also, before we get to more promotion, I'm going to be starting this. If you have a brand or a product or anything, a show, a restaurant that you want to promote on Chris and Company, or through my Tiger videos as well, I am open for business. My DMs are open on Twitter. I will be willing to negotiate with people. I'm at a place now where, given the situation I'm in, I want to try to do the independent thing for a minute and see if that can grow. I had some really good conversations with Foolish Baseball talking about that after we recorded our episode together. I want to see how that can grow, and I'm willing to listen to offers and all that stuff. I'm new to this part of the game, but hopefully it can work out, and hopefully it can be a lot of fun. Like I said, you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a review. Let us know that you like the show. I love doing these interviews. I know I keep saying that, but I've talked to Austin about this. We have the hard part down, which is I believe in this content. I like this content. And it seems like many of you are enjoying this content as well. And that really means a lot, especially considering the kind of whirlwind that we've been through. So we will be back next week with another interview. I know who the guest is, but I'm kind of keeping things a secret now. But I think you'll really enjoy it. It'll be a much interview. It'll be much ado about nothing. No, it'll be a much different interview than what we've done recently. But I think it'll be, once again, a thoughtful interview and hopefully a fun interview as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you very much for your continued support, everybody, and continue to watch this program and listen to this show. It means a lot. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.
I'm not taking my sneakers off. I am Sneakers O'Toole.